Okay, so let's look at graphing transformations. Most of the time, students are pretty familiar with your basic transformations, the ones that you spend time in high school on. The horizontal shift, the vertical shift, um, your x-axis and y-axis reflections. It's this type of question that I would like to spend a little time on with you that usually needs a little bit more explaining. So, like I said, just to reiterate quickly, most people, remember, or think about like a function like y equals the square root of x. And then you think about how to translate that, right? So if I'm going to do a shift right or left, so let's just pick one. Let's say, 2 units to the right. Then this would be y equals the square root of. So if we're going to do a horizontal shift, we're going to add or subtract directly from the variable, and it's the opposite of what you'd think. So if we're going to move to the right 2 units, we're actually going to subtract 2. So we know the graph of the square root of x looks like this, and then the graph of the square root of x minus 2 would be shifted to the right, 2 units. If we were going to shift up 2 units, then we would add 2 to the function f or y itself. So it would be, I just wrote 2 instead of x. So it would be the square root of x plus 2, where the 2 is on the outside. You're adding directly to the function. So again, if this is the square root of x plus 2 would look like this. I like the square root of x also to discuss reflections. So if you're going to do an x-axis reflection, which would be, about the x-axis, we would be looking at y equals negative f of x, or the negative again is out front. So this would be, if our original graph y equals the square root of x, negative square root of x would be like this, because I'm actually negating all of the outputs. When I put 1 in for x, the output is negative. And a y-axis reflection is actually y equals negative f of x, meaning the negative is on the inside. I drew my square root a little wacky. So this would be a y-axis reflection. So again, if this is the square root of x, square root of negative x would look like this. Because again, if you think about it, like let's say you were plugging in x equals 1, then that wouldn't work, right? There is no value. You can't take the square root of negative 1. So the domain really are just the values of x to the left of 0. So like if I plugged in x equals negative 1, then y would equal the square root of negative 1, which is positive 1, which again would map to a point, something like that. So that's in a nutshell all your basic translations. Usually, and it's really good practice to go back through your parent functions and know the domain and range of each of those. Y equals x squared, y equals x cubed, y equals square root x that we just talked about, y equals the absolute value of x, y equals x, also the reciprocal function, 1 over x. That's really easy to get information on. If you aren't comfortable with those already, I would spend a little time practicing those and making sure that you understand the domain and range of each, because you will see a couple of questions where you have to translate those different functions.